Okay, got nothing else to do, so here we go with the reviews again. Movie reviews! What am I going to review this time? So this is on Crave. Interview with the Vampire. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Of course, watching it back now, it's a little bit tricky because, you know, it's hard to watch things back. And, like, we now are aware of, like, all these different things that we didn't know about before that are kind of, like, disturbing watching now. So I'm sure it's going to be full of surprises. They're like, oh, this is horrible. But, I liked it so much that I remember when I really liked something, I would go and I would find the book, and I read the book. And I'm not really into fiction, so it was kind of a thing. And I went and I read the Anne Rice novel. Of course, I'm talking about the movie directed by Neil Jordan. I read the Anne Rice novel. I bought the soundtrack. I was obsessed with the soundtrack. I think I learned part of the soundtrack on the piano. I was drawing pictures about it. I was just completely obsessed. I did the same thing with Legends of the Fallen, when even Brad Pitt had like a twofer in that year, and he made these incredible movies. So Interview with the Vampire is about, so there's a bunch of different books. It's the Vampire Chronicles. I think that it started with, I'm pretty sure it started with the Vampire Lestat. In the movie they talk about, so in the movie this is Louis's book. I think Louis only has one book, and I think this is it. Interview with the Vampire is the only one. But Lestat, if you want to know more about Lestat, there's a book called The Vampire Lestat. In that one, he talks about, you get a bit more about him. You see when they're at the dinner table and Lestat gets really upset because he's asking him about this life. Lestat is really pissed off because the guy that made him, oh god, I can't remember the name of the guy that made him, but he basically turned him into a vampire, didn't tell him anything about anything, and just fucking jumped into the fire and burned himself alive. And there's a book, I think that Anne Rice wrote a book on the guy who turned him into a vampire as well. I think I tried to read a bit of that, but I don't think it was as interesting. But Lestat is actually very, he's a lot more, in the books, he's a lot more like Louis than in this. He's kind of a very sensitive person. Like in Memnoch the Devil, I've not finished that book yet, but he spends this whole time stalking this guy, and he's so obsessed with this guy, he basically almost kind of falls in love with him. He really falls in love with characters because this guy collects art, and Lestat's really into art, and he's following him around, and even after he's killed him, he's still like super obsessed with it, and he's like, oh, maybe I made a mistake, because he thinks this guy's like this aesthete, and he's like, why did I take this person up from the earth? So Lestat is actually a lot more like Louis in the books than he is in this movie, and in the books, Lestat only kills like evildoers. Like the guy is like a mafia guy that he killed in Memnoch the Devil. But like Lestat only really does kill evildoers. In the movie, he doesn't do that, and that frustrates me, because one thing, Lestat is very rootable. In the books, he's very rootable because he's a very thoughtful, introspective person who really values like art and music, and like, so in that way it's kind of a bummer they didn't get that part right, but I really enjoyed the movie. Part 2 with more trivia.